He let her go on a Monday morning, signed the paperwork without lifting his eyes from his earnings report. To Richard Ashford, Vera was background noise with a good filing system. 3 days later, alone in the company server room at 2 in the morning, watching recovered security footage with his chest pressed tight against his lungs, he finally understood exactly what he had thrown away. The footage showed Vera disarming a man with a combat knife, quietly, methodically, like she was sorting spreadsheets. Ashford Meridian Pharmaceuticals occupied the top 11 floors of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. Richard had built it from a cramped lab in New Jersey with $40,000, a federal grant, and the particular kind of obsessive focus that ruins marriages but builds empires. By 54, he controlled patents on 6 critical drugs, employed 3,400 people, and kept 2 senators on retainer through channels his lawyers preferred not to discuss in daylight. He was not a good man exactly, but he was a precise one. He ran his executive floor with military exactness. Every meeting in 15-minute blocks, every visitor logged, every vendor vetted to the 3rd degree. In a world full of people who wanted something from him, the patents, the leverage, the market share, Richard had developed a fine-tuned intolerance for anything that didn't perform exactly as expected. Vera Calloway had performed exactly as expected, until the Monday with the FDA review. She had joined Ashford Meridian 18 months ago as a senior data analyst, slipping into the executive floor's ecosystem so quietly that Richard often forgot she existed between interactions. She was 28, maybe 29. She wore gray blazers in the kind of flat institutional shade that discouraged the eye from landing on her. Dark hair, usually clipped back with something she bought from a pharmacy checkout aisle. She didn't make small talk. She didn't decorate her desk. She produced work of a speed and accuracy that Richard had never found necessary to praise because it simply never required correction. She was a machine. You gave her a dataset and flawless formatted conclusions came out the other end. Until she wasn't. The FDA review should have been a triumph. Ashford Meridian's trial data for Rivaxis, a treatment for a rare pediatric blood disorder that Richard had spent 6 years and $90 million developing, was about to be presented to 3 senior officials from the Office of New Drugs. A successful review meant expedited approval. It meant market exclusivity. It meant another decade of financial breathing room. Richard sat at the head of the boardroom table, flanked by his chief medical officer and 2 attorneys. The FDA officials were across from him, tablets open, coffee cooling in front of them. He pressed the intercom. "Vera, bring the Rivaxis presentation package. 3 hard copies in the encrypted drive." Silence. He pressed it again. "Vera." Nothing. The FDA's lead official, a humorless man named Gerald Webb, checked his watch. Richard felt the first needle of cold irritation. Vera did not disappear. She arrived 17 minutes before her shift started every single day. She ate lunch at her desk. Her absence now in front of federal regulators was a hairline crack running through the foundation of the morning. 11 minutes passed. Richard made polite conversation he could barely hear himself producing. Offered coffee refills no one wanted. 16 minutes. The door opened. Vera walked in carrying 3 folders under one arm and an encrypted drive clipped to her lanyard. Her gray blazer was buttoned wrong. 1 button off, the whole front slightly misaligned. Her breathing was a fraction faster than her usual controlled pace. There was a small red mark at her hairline, half hidden under the edge of her dark hair, that looked like the beginning of a bruise. "Apologies for the delay," she said, completely flat. She placed a folder in front of each official, set the drive beside Richard's water glass, and stepped back. Gerald Webb made a small sound of disapproval and opened his folder. The meeting continued. The data was impeccable. The review went well, technically. But the 16-minute gap had introduced a note of disorder that Richard felt like a splinter under his thumbnail for the next 2 hours. When the FDA officials left, he asked Vera to stay. She stood in the center of his office with her hands linked in front of her. The blazer was still buttoned wrong. She hadn't fixed it. 16 minutes, he said. He was at the window back to her, watching a cloud move across the Hudson. "Yes," she said. Gerald Webb decides how long approvals take based on whether his coffee was hot enough. "Do you understand what was at stake?" "I do." "Then explain to me what was more important than delivering a file during a federal review." A pause. "An unforeseen internal matter," she said. "I resolved it." Richard turned around. He looked at her the way he looked at a contract clause that might be hiding something. The wrongly buttoned blazer, the mark at her hairline, the breathing that was 1 degree too controlled. He crossed to his desk, opened the top drawer, set a white envelope on the wood. 2 months severance in cash. Clear your desk and leave your badge. He expected something, tears or righteous anger, or at minimum a flinch. Most people, faced with the sudden end of a livelihood that paid as well as his did, fought back. They begged. They threatened HR. Vera Calloway looked at the envelope for exactly 2 seconds. "Understood, Mr. Ashford," she said. She stepped forward, picked it up, turned around, and walked out of his office without a single change in her stride. The door clicked shut behind her with no more weight than a file cabinet closing. In the bullpen, she assembled a cardboard box with 4 efficient folds. She placed inside it a small succulent plant, spare charger, a pair of reading glasses, and nothing else. No photographs, no cards pinned to a corkboard. Her desk had always looked like it belonged to someone who hadn't quite moved in yet. Beckett Moss, head of corporate security, a former Army Ranger with a jaw like poured concrete, stopped in the doorway and watched her. "You leaving?" "Yes." "He fired you?" "He terminated my employment, yes." Beckett looked toward Richard's closed door with an expression that suggested he was running complicated arithmetic. Over the delay. Over the delay, she picked up her box. "Beckett, keep an eye on the server room access logs, specifically the secondary entry panel on B level. The logs from the last 72 hours may need forensic review." She paused. "Also, Mr. Ashford prefers his afternoon tea at exactly 3:15. The new person will get it wrong." "How do you know about the B-level panel?" Beckett said slowly. She gave him a look that was almost warm. "I notice things, goodbye." The elevator doors closed behind her. By Wednesday, the absence of Vera Calloway had become a specific, identifiable problem. Her replacement was eager and thorough and wrong about everything. She brewed the coffee too light. She scheduled a 9 a.m. call that Richard had explicitly forbidden before 10. She sent a file to the wrong Gerald. On Wednesday evening, Richard walked out to Vera's old desk and didn't know why. He pulled the drawers open, empty, clean. He tried the bottom left drawer, locked. He went to his office for a letter opener, came back and pried it open with the particular brute impatience he brought to anything that resisted him. A small silver USB drive, an index card. The card read, "Server room B-level, access log 11-4, check timestamp 9:41 a.m. He didn't sleep that night. At 2 in the morning, he rode the elevator down with Beckett and a technician pulled from his bed. The recovered footage from the B-level secondary panel loaded onto the monitor. Timestamp 9:24 a.m. Monday morning. Vera walked into the server room carrying 3 folders and the encrypted drive clipped to her lanyard. She was heading for the exit panel on the far wall. She had 11 feet to cross. A man stepped out from behind the secondary server rack. He was wearing a maintenance uniform that didn't belong to anyone on payroll. Broad-shouldered, efficient in the way that hired people become efficient, with a carbon fiber tactical knife already open in his hand. He said something. His lips moved. He gestured at her lanyard, toward the executive floor, toward the boardroom. "Watch what she does with the folders," Beckett said quietly. Vera didn't drop them. She shifted her weight 2 inches to the left, and then she moved. The folders swung upward in an arc, the hardback spines catching the man's knife wrist at a precise angle that forced his grip open. The knife dropped. In the same motion, she stepped inside his reach, drove the heel of her palm into his chin, and when he stumbled backward, she caught his arm and used his own recoiling weight to drive him face first into the server rack. The rack shuddered on its anchors. He tried to recover. He was big and trained and not finished. She didn't give him the opportunity to remember that. She got behind him, locked one arm around his throat, and held it for exactly the count that ended the fight without ending him. He slid down the rack and sat on the floor, with his eyes open and empty. She picked up her folders. She picked up the knife, wiped the blade on the hem of her blazer, which explained the stain Richard had noticed and attributed to a broken pen, and placed it inside the lining of her bag. She looked at the man on the floor, dragged him with both hands behind the secondary server rack, with a strength that had no business existing in someone her size. She walked out of the server room. Timestamp, 9:40 a.m. The boardroom door had opened at 9:41. Richard stared at his hands in the cold dark of the server room. He had fired her 4 hours after she'd disarmed a professional contract operative and delivered his presentation anyway, and she had said nothing, not a single word about any of it. "Who?" Richard said. His voice sounded strange in the room. Beckett had already been working the phone. Names Devereux, linked to 3 corporate espionage jobs in the past 2 years, all of them connected to the same client. Pause. Warren Quinlan. Richard went very still. Warren Quinlan ran Viridian Bio, Ashford Meridian's most aggressive competitor. He had been trying to acquire the company for 2 years through every legal mechanism available. The Rivaxis formula was worth more than the company itself. "Find her," Richard said. We tried. Her apartment was cleared out by Tuesday morning. Cash lease, no forwarding address, no phone activity, no card transactions. Beckett set down the tablet. "Boss, I ran her background. The real Vera Calloway died in Portland when she was 4 years old. The social security number is a rebuild. Her references go to numbers that have been disconnected for a year." Richard sat back. "She's not Quinlan's," he said. "Not a question. Quinlan's people didn't neutralize Quinlan's people." "No," Beckett said. "She's something else entirely." Richard thought about the Rivaxis file. He thought about a piece of data he had not yet connected to anything. Pull every external communication she made in the last 18 months. Not the official channels, the side requests, small invoices, anything that moves through a private channel. Beckett found it the next morning. A specialty diagnostics lab in Queens. A communication through a personal encrypted email buried in the shadow of a file request in the server logs. He drove Richard there himself. The woman at the front desk looked at Richard's card and made a quiet call. She came back and said that a patient named Noah had been receiving treatment through an anonymous sponsorship account for 14 months. The medication, Rivaxis. Richard sat in the car outside the lab for a long time. She hadn't been building a case against him. She'd been keeping someone alive. Beckett found her because intelligence people know how to read the shape of a person's habits in data that looks like noise. The safe house was a rented room above a laundromat in Astoria, paid in cash, registered to a name that went nowhere on a standard database. But it wasn't invisible, not to someone who knew where to look. Richard came alone. He knocked. The door opened 3 seconds later, which meant she had heard him on the stairs and had been standing at it already, deciding. Vera was wearing jeans and a white shirt, no blazer, no clip in her hair. She looked different and exactly the same. Her hands were at her sides. A knife was on the kitchen counter within reach of the door. "How?" she said. "The lab in Queens," he said. "Noah." Something moved behind her eyes. A door she'd kept locked for a long time, giving slightly on its hinges. She stepped back. He walked in. She sat down at the small table. She looked at the laptop screen, a patient monitoring dashboard, medication schedule, the kind of thing you check the way other people check weather. And when she looked back up, the performance was gone. The flat efficiency. The careful nothing of her expression. "My brother Noah is 11, she said. "He has Calvert-Frey syndrome. Rivaxis is the only treatment that's been effective for his case. When he was 9, I lost my job at the FDA because I went too far chasing a counterfeit ring that was flooding the market with fake versions of an earlier Ashford drug." "The counterfeits," Richard said. 12 people died, including my mother. Her voice didn't waver, but it didn't have to. The ring traced back to Viridian Bio, to Quinlan. "He was suppressing your market share by poisoning your brand. I gathered the evidence. The FDA buried it because Quinlan had a better lawyer than I had a supervisor." Richard said nothing. He listened the way he listened to testimony. "When Noah got sick, I understood what was at stake. Rivaxis was 18 months from approval, and Quinlan was already making moves to steal the formula or destroy the trial data. If he succeeded, Noah wouldn't have a treatment." She folded her hands on the table. "I built a new identity. I applied for the Analyst position. The executive floor controls access to everything. The trial data, the vendor relationships, the visitor logs. From there I could see threats before they materialized." "How many?" 7. 4 attempts on the trial servers, 2 attempts to compromise your medical officer. Devereux was the 7th. She paused. He was the most direct. Richard thought about the morning she had walked into the boardroom, with a bruise forming at her hairline, and said unforeseen internal matter to his face without blinking. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. "Because you would have treated me as an asset," Vera said without hesitation. "An asset is something you deploy, something you exhaust, something you eventually sacrifice when the math requires it. I was more useful invisible." She looked at him steadily. "Also, Mr. Ashford, you fired me before I had the opportunity to reconsider the question." The silence between them was specific, not empty, dense, the way a room feels after a long storm has finally stopped. "Quinlan is moving," Richard said. The FDA delay bought him time. "He's going after the trial data through physical means now. My building's security rotation has a gap on the 40th floor service entrance between 11 and midnight. He knows about it because someone sold him the schedule." Vera nodded slowly. "I know." "Then help me close it." She looked at him for a long moment. The room was quiet except for the laundromat below, a low, rhythmic turning. "You understand," she said, "that closing it means Quinlan loses everything. The counterfeit operation, the espionage network, the leverage he has over the official who buried my evidence. It means Noah keeps his treatment. It means I'd rather have you across the table from me than not," Richard said, "and I've been operating without a real partner for 54 years. Something crossed Vera Calloway's face that wasn't controlled or measured or calibrated for invisibility. It was small. It was real. "I want a seat at the board," she said, "not a desk in the bullpen." Done. Noah's treatment is covered, not through an anonymous account, formally, contractually, in writing. Done. She stood up, reached past him to the bag by the wall, unzipped the front pocket and pulled out a slim black notebook. She set it on the table between them. 18 months of threat intelligence on Quinlan's operation, she said. "I built it from your own servers. You had the data. You just didn't know what you were looking at." Richard looked at the notebook. He thought about what it had cost her to build it quietly, from inside a company that didn't know she was there. He thought about her sitting across from Gerald Webb, with a bruise at her hairline, saying nothing. His empire hadn't been threatened. It had been standing on her. "Standard rate applies," Vera said, pulling on her jacket, "and I won't be getting anyone's coffee." "I never expected you to," Richard said. She picked up the notebook. "Then let's go fix your security gap, Mr. Ashford." Warren Quinlan was arrested at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. The evidence Vera had quietly assembled over 18 months, cross-referenced with server room footage that Beckett matched to 4 other incidents Quinlan's team had written off as maintenance anomalies, was enough to bury him several times over. The FDA's buried report resurfaced with it. The counterfeit ring was named. 12 deaths were officially acknowledged. Noah started a new treatment cycle the following week with his actual name on the file. Rivaxis received expedited approval on a Friday morning. Richard was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows when Vera walked in with the notification. She set it on his desk and didn't say anything. He looked at the paper. He looked at her. "I've been building this company for 30 years, he said, "and I've been doing most of it wrong." "You've been doing it alone," Vera said. "Those are related problems." She sat down across from him, not at a side desk, not in the corner. Across the table, where the morning light came through the window and made everything look like it had come through something difficult and arrived somewhere cleaner. She opened the black notebook to a fresh page. Some things, it turned out, were only invisible until you finally learned how to look.